Hello, and welcome to the A Way to Live Well podcast. If you've always wanted to know more about sustainable food and cooking, you're in for a treat. On today's show, I'm speaking with Tanya Fairtlough. Tanya is a sustainable chef. She's part creator of the Cous Cousins and is presently working on her own new venture called the Curly Kale. She's also a community motivator and recently created Cara, a community interest company dedicated to bringing people in the wellness industry together. On the show today, we chat about how she came into her line of work, what inspires her, and just how she stays motivated. She also shared one of her own great recipes for you to try at home. I really enjoyed speaking with her, and I hope you enjoy listening. Tanya, why don't you tell me a little bit more about what it is that you're doing now and what's really spurring you and what's your passion at the moment, what's going on?
Well, I've had quite a long break over the summer because I was away in Ireland doing a yoga teacher training, which was great and Amazing. I really enjoyed, and I'm definitely interested in pursuing that at the minute. So I'm sort of like settling back in, working out where to go with everything. But I've got a lot of plans for different projects coming up. So with the cara project, I've got 2 events that I'm in the process of planning. They're not finalised yet, but soon they will be. And with the Curly Kale, which is the name of my food business now, I'm still working on doing sort of supper clubs, and me and you are doing a yoga and brunch club later on this month.
So excited.
Yeah. And so I've got some more ideas for those kinds of events for that. But I'm getting more and more interested in the sustainable aspect of food. So I'm kind of thinking where to take it in the future, possibly yoga and sustainable food retreats or community projects about teaching people how to source food sustainably.
These are all really important issues, and I think people and the world can really benefit from more of that kind of stuff. What is it that you think really kind of spurred your initial interest in that? Or did you have like some kind of aha moment, or was it like a gradual process, or, tell us a little bit about that maybe.
Well, kind of with everything that's now is my main interest, they kind of were in my life like all along, but I sort of, like, loads of people in my family are yogis. I've got several yoga teachers in my family. Like, my great aunt is a yoga teacher, my grandma did loads of yoga, and my mum and her partner are really into environmentally friendly things of all descriptions. So I guess I kind of grew up with all these things, but I sort of ignored it or wasn't really aware of it until a couple of years ago. And then I moved to Istanbul and I got into doing yoga there sort of properly, and since then everything's just, all of those things that I grew up around have started coming back in and becoming main interests for me. Healthy eating I've always been really into that, and I've always loved cooking, but the other issues are sort of kind of re-emerged recently.
Oh, that's really cool. Did you have like a moment where there was some kind of challenge that came up? Like, it sounds like it was a really lovely transition into where you are now, but did you ever have like moments of doubt about, kind of where you were going on this path, or like what it was gonna bring up, or where it was all headed?
Yeah, definitely. And I still do, because I'm one of those people that has like lots of ideas, and I do like actually try to make them happen as well, but in the end, like, you have to let some of them go because you can't do everything. So I regularly like reassess what I'm doing, and I'm like, have I made the right choice? And there's been some sort of events and projects that haven't really worked out, but actually in the end I learnt from it, and you always get something out of projects that you run, even if it's not what you're expecting. I've had to sort of several times reassess what I'm doing and think, oh, actually I should have done that maybe, but you don't know until you try something. So I can't think of one main moment, but on a sort of pretty much daily basis I spend a lot of time thinking about where I'm going and if it's the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all do.
Yeah.
What initially kind of connected us was your sort of ideas about community. And I think that's a really important thing. I think in order for us to all kind of progress forward, we need to sort of build those really strong communities where people's intentions are to sort of help each other, build each other up. And that's something that you were working on when I sort of first met you, and I thought it was really great to chat to you about that. Just wondering sort of what that means to you and why that was so important for you, and probably is now still.
Well, I've been working I've been self-employed for most of my adult life, most of my working life, really. And I think that I love things that I do, but it can be quite isolating and lonely. And so when I started thinking more about becoming an entrepreneur and moving into like the wellness industry and again being self-employed, I really didn't want to do it sort of on my own again. I wanted to sort of try to build community into my own working life, and I thought I could try and help other people do that as well. So
that's really cool.
Yeah, and I think like living in London, it is really difficult to meet people, and basically work is sort of the only way to meet people as an adult. So, you know, I think that if you live other places, you end up having much more of a community life anyway, often, I think. But in big cities, you have to work extra hard to have it.
Yeah, it's so true. We're pretty lucky to be in this community. I feel like it's more open than maybe some others. There's just a lot more kind of realization, I think, that we need to kind of share and be connected. What was kind of the best piece of advice you've ever been given? Or like what is something you kind of like live by? Do you have like a mantra that you sort of give yourself, like tell yourself every day that gets you through it, sort of?
Who was it? Maya Angelou said, forgive yourself for not knowing what you didn't know until you learnt it.
Yeah, I love that.
So I think that's like pretty important. Yeah. Like it's just always being really kind to yourself and forgiving. But also not just forgiving, like embracing everything that you do, even if it's like failures or mistakes or something, you know, like it's just, so what?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So a lot of the stuff you say is like really resonates with me, and it's always, yeah, you keep going with whatever you are sort of passionate about, and find a way to integrate wholesome things into your life, like community, good food, yoga. What kind of is your daily practice of sort of those things that really solidify or kind of form the foundation of what makes you feel and be able to be resilient and continue on forward through your journey?
I think yoga really is the main thing. I mean, my self-practice has changed a lot recently since doing my yoga teacher training, because it's, you know, such a new, different experience. And actually, since then, my home practice has developed massively. Before that, I found it quite difficult and I needed to go to other people's classes, but now I sort of don't want to, and I'm really loving my own self-practice at home. And also I really like doing restorative yoga at home, not just sort of, you know, more dynamic practices. And just any time throughout the day, if I'm feeling a bit stressed or anxious, I'm just like, whatever, I'm going to take half an hour and do a bit of yoga.
Yeah.
So I think for me that's the main thing, but also trying to think about how sustainably I'm living myself and try to get back into nature a bit, spending some time outside in the garden, in the parks, going outside of London, and having a lot of, like, a good amount of alone time and sort of silent time. But also it can be that you, or at least I find that you can get into sort of too much alone time, especially if you're in that sort of headspace. You don't want to be with other people because it feels like it's going to sort of throw you out of balance, but actually you can take that too far. So yeah. I think sort of finding that balance, living sort of virtuously, and having some time by yourself, and also actually going out and enjoying yourself a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I often find myself that it's in those quiet times that you start to be able to really recognize what you really need, right? Like if you don't have that time to yourself, you don't know if you're just kind of carrying on in this sort of cycle of things, or if that is what's really benefiting you at that moment. Do you have any book recommendations or any literature, or maybe even a film or a poem that really changed or impacted your life, or that we could share with the listeners just to...
Well, I really loved The Prophet by Khalil Gibran.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if that's how you pronounce it.
Yeah, that is a good book.
I just find that really lovely. It's such a nice thing to sort of dip in and out of every now and then.
Do you have, just going back to your yoga, do you have a favorite posture that you like to practice, or?
Well, right now I'm doing a lot of practicing back bends, which I used to really hate. I didn't like them at all. But since doing my yoga teacher, I've got so much more awareness of the reason why you do different postures and the benefits. And I'm really finding a lot more enjoyment in poses and, all kinds of things that I used to find really difficult. Mm-hmm. But I'm also really enjoying using lots of props.
Okay, yeah.
I've sort of, even though my training was sort of Ashtanga based. We did use some props, but it wasn't heavily prop based. But I've sort of taken it now, and I'm doing the same practice at home, but with loads of props, and I'm loving it.
Yeah, I love props. I think they're great. There's so much you can get out of them. So the other thing I was going to ask is, do you have who would be your most influential sort of teachers, or do you have anyone in particular, or is it more a style of yoga, or is it more the spiritual aspects that you go for, or?
I kind of change. There isn't one particular style of yoga that I like. I like to mix it up a bit, and it depends on what mood I'm in and the season, where I am in my life. So I sort of change my mind quite a lot about what my favourite kind of yoga is, but I think that's just because I don't have one. I definitely like sort of more gentle one. No, but that's not even true. So I can't think of any particular teacher, but my great aunt that I mentioned earlier, I'm really
I was going to ask if she was like your main sort of influencer.
Well, actually, because her whole lifestyle is she lives in a little village, which I don't want to do, but she has a garden, and she grows loads of veg in it, and she lives really mostly off her land, I think, even though it's just a garden.
That sounds so idyllic.
Yeah, and she does Iyengar yoga every day, and she teaches one class a week, and I think even a few years ago she said she didn't want to do it anymore, but people still just show up because they love her, so.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And
what's her name?
Hillary.
Okay.
Yeah. Nice. And she does pottery as well, but it's sort of really not sort of grasping at things, it's just very content lifestyle. So I'm sort of trying to tune into her a bit.
That's an interesting concept, this idea of contentment, right? It's something we're always kind of striving for, I think, in the yoga and wellness community. And I think so many of us can be really free-spirited in a way, so it's hard to sort of be content. There's always this kind of wanting to venture outwards or see the world or gain new experiences, so that's almost in contradiction to this idea of just being content and happy with where you are. And sort of, how do you feel along that spectrum? Do you mostly feel like you are content, or is there still this kind of
it's something that I think about a lot, and I'm not really sure, A part of me wants to go to India to practice yoga there for 6 months. A part of me wants to go and do other things. There's always other things that I want to do.
So the other thing I really want to speak to you about today is food. So I can basically talk about food all day, and I get made fun of for it sometimes by certain people, but it's such an interesting topic for me. I think food is wonderful. It also brings people together, and I think that's one of the great values of it, besides it being just hugely nutritional and just wonderful. And so I want to hear sort of what your experience and what your feeling is about food, and what it is that really makes that central to your sort of goings on?
Yeah. Well, since I started my food business with my cousin, my ideas about food have changed a lot, and it's been such a big part of my life since then. It always has been, but especially since then. And I mean, one of the really noticeable things is how much people just really enjoy themselves at supper clubs, hopefully, most of the time, like the social aspect of it. And there is something about having a good long time, you know, maybe people have a couple of drinks or maybe they don't, and sharing this food together, because we always make sort of big bowls and put it on the table and then people serve themselves. So there's really something about the like bringing people together aspect of it that I just find so great at the minute. And, you know, people sort of, they want nice tasting food, obviously, but it's more about the experience of it. On my aunt's farm in Spain, I was there for a course and I was the like head chef for that, and everybody said that the food was good, but it was more about the sort of feeling of the meal times. And I think that there's just I don't even know how to talk about it, because it's like, what is that, you know, what is like I don't know why some experiences are so sort of nourishing, you know, but
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I think also, especially with the sustainable food thing, that brings another element of it. Like if you really try to use food that comes from the country that you're in, and people can really connect with that, and is sort of healing in a way. I don't even know what it is about it, but it feels so important. I guess it's also partly going, you know, it's only quite recently that we've been able to eat food from all over the world. So it's sort of connecting back to like this pre-globalization times or something.
Absolutely. So on the whole sustainable sort of topic, what would be your top tips to people in order to sort of try to live that little bit more sustainably and sort of decrease their sort of impact?
Well, I feel like in terms of sourcing ingredients locally, there's actually tons of people doing that, and there's loads of resources. And if you start getting into it and you do a bit of research, then it's, you know, like a rabbit hole. Like you find one thing and then you find another thing, and then you just get really into it, and you just want to read about it all day, or at least I do. So I think, like, if you just look for example, there's a website called Hodmadods, which they work with local farmers in the UK, and everything that it's a platform to buy food from, and everything's grown in the UK. Most things are organic, and they've got the first commercial crop of lentils in the UK. They've got the first commercial crop of chia seeds grown in the UK.
Wow.
So they're a really good platform. I mean, also going to zero waste shops, but even, you know, markets, fruit and veg markets, if you take your own bags, it's super cheap, and you can cut out the plastic and support. I don't know who the farmers are, but at least you're supporting the suppliers, independent suppliers. So I guess it's really, and stop cooking food from scratch is probably the number one thing.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah, because most sort of ready-made food is you don't know where it comes from, you know, how it's got there.
Yeah.
But if you buy sort of whole foods, then you can control it much more where you're getting it from.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say to people who just think that that's going to be extremely expensive, or they don't have time, they live in London, you know?
Well, expense-wise, I mean, I don't think it actually is that much more expensive. I mean, if you have, you know, British-grown organic oats for breakfast every morning, that's cheaper than if you have a ready-made cereal, or, you know, shop-bought cereal. Yeah. So at the minute, for breakfast, I'm having porridge with apples that I like picked up from the wall of my neighbour's house that they've grown. But you can get cheap apples now because it's the season in the UK. Yeah. With a little small spoonful of local honey. Sure, if you buy a jar of local honey, it's expensive, but if you just have a little bit, with this sort of thing, it's always like that. It's expensive at the beginning when you first buy something, but then if you think about the amount of portions it serves, it's actually not expensive. And things like lentils are super cheap. even British grown quinoa and things like that actually are cheap in terms of how much you're going to use.
That's amazing that they grow quinoa here. I just mind blown.
Well, apparently it's quite easy actually. That's like the most easy thing to grow in here. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So you can get, it's got quite a lot of people that grow quinoa, but things like lentils are really difficult. So these people are the only people that have managed it or something. I've been told by people that know about these things.
Right.
But yeah, you can get quinoa, you can get like all sorts of things. I mean, it can be time consuming, to be honest with you. And sometimes my friends will say to me, when I, do a lot of cooking, whatever, they're like, oh, but how can you be bothered? Why don't you just buy something else? I'm like, because this is my hobby. I enjoy it. I'd rather do this than do something else.
Yeah.
So in terms of time wise, it might be a bit more, but if you get into it, then you're spending that time doing something that you enjoy. So it
also like feeds into the whole being mindful, right? Because you're taking that time, that consideration. When you go to sit down for your meal, you might consider a bit more the whole process that this meal took to get to your plate, and I think that's huge value.
And then you enjoy it more, I think, or at least I do.
Yeah. We live in this kind of culture where people end up like sitting in front of their computer screens eating meals, and you're not even thinking about what you're eating. You're just like shoveling food into your face, and that's it has to be done sometimes, and I'm not condemning anyone by any means, but it's like there has to be some time made for just valuing it. It's going into your body, and it makes us, right? So
and sure, like, I mean, again, it's balance, isn't it? Like last night I had an Indian takeaway and it was great and I really enjoyed it, but if I did that every day I wouldn't, because I would feel rubbish. I would feel really crap. And that's the other thing, if you generally those kinds of more sustainable food, if you buy cooking that way, then it's healthier, so you actually feel better. And once you start feeling better, you start eating well and feeling better, the idea of eating loads of rubbish it does not feel good. Like, you don't want to do it. So I feel like the more you do it, the more you want to do it. But again, every now and then having a takeaway or going to a restaurant or whatever, do it.
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point, to not like beat yourself up about it. Like if you happen to, as you say, just have a takeout one day, that's okay, and then just get back to the routine that you were heading down,
And even if you go through a phase where every day, like in the afternoon, you have a chocolate binge, which like we're
chocolate.
Exactly. But it's like we're people when we're just trying our best, so it doesn't have to be like you have to do this, and if you don't, then you failed, but it's sort of just every good bit is a good bit.
Yeah. No, absolutely. What is your favorite thing to cook at the moment? What's your favorite meal? What's your like go-to, something that's maybe even quick and easy that we can maybe like pin a recipe at the end of this podcast for all our listeners to?
Well, I've really gotten into cooking with these British grown lentils from Hodmedod's actually, and because they're whole red lentils, which you normally can't find. Normally their red lentils are split, but because they're whole, you can sprout them, which makes it so much easier to digest. So you literally, like, it's so easy. You can just throw it into a sieve or something like that, or soak it for 24 hours and then put it into a sieve. And then if you just rinse it twice a day and just leave it with tea towel covering it, after a couple of maybe 2 or 3 days, they'll have sprouted. So it's really, it sounds like a pain, but it's not. It's super easy. Okay. And then one thing I like to do with them is just to boil them up, and then afterwards to add a ton of spices and cooked onions and things, or mix them with rice at the beginning and then cook them together, just with a bunch of spices, and then you can add like a bit of salad, a bit of yogurt, a bit of chili sauce, whatever kind of things like that you fancy at the end. But it's really tasty and it's super easy and it's filling. And
would you say you're predominantly a vegetarian or a vegan, or what's your kind of preference? Do you mix it up? Do you think is one thing better than the other? Or
I mean, I'm sure lots of people find it a bit annoying, this term, but I guess I would call myself a flexitarian.
Right.
Because I'm not anything actually. I do, but most, maybe 99% of what I eat is vegan, but there isn't anything that I don't eat ever.
Okay.
I mean, in terms of sustainability, there's tons of new research recently that says that you shouldn't eat meat and you shouldn't eat dairy, you know. So that, I mean, I think that is probably true, but I eat dairy sometimes, and you know, most people will. So I'm not going to say that anything is better than anything else. I think it's up to people what they want to do.
So you can sustainably source dairy, presumably, as well, or not so
there's
much?
there's more sustainable dairy compared to other forms of dairy, but there's some issues that are sort of, it's unsustainable in some ways, and it will always, like, there's no way to bypass that. But at the same time, if you just eat avocados and quinoa and, you know, maca root powder and all these superfoods from the other side of the world, then that's not sustainable either, you know. So there's tons of different arguments. So it's kind of hard to tell, actually, the definitive truth about what's sustainable food and what isn't. So you kind of got to go with your own instincts in a way. But I guess it's sort of about doing your best. So if you do choose to eat dairy, getting it from local farmers who have a good reputation. Organic is always a good option, and trying not to have too much of it, you know. But it's that the same as everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that comes back to the same thing of your honey, you know, you're just having like a tiny teaspoon of it and you're enjoying it rather than just going like mental. So, and that's a really important point. So the other thing, I suppose, I would love to hear about your upcoming projects.
Well, this month I've got quite a few parties that I'm doing catering for. That seems to be the call of order at the minute. But most of my upcoming projects are still in planning phase, just because I've had a good 6 weeks out of action while I was away for the summer. So most of them... So with the 2 cara events, I'm not going to talk about them specifically because I haven't confirmed the venues and things. But I got some ideas for different people that I'm going to invite to come to do workshops. A friend of mine has recently she's into astrology. Astronomy. Astrology. Which one's the star sign one?
This is astrology.
Astrology. She's into astrology, and her and her friend have started a project on that. So they're going to come and host one of the events and do a workshop on that, as well as there being time for everybody to socialise. And there's several other people that I've contacted about doing workshops that are about encouraging people who work in wellness to build wellness into their own working life, and also just bringing people together and encouraging collaboration and supporting each other. But more information will be available about that soon, once it's all finalised. In a couple of weeks, I'm guest chefing for Third Space Canteen, which is in Bermondsey, set up by this woman, Nicola. It's a really great concept in sustainable food that's sort of like a supper club, but a weekly one. The idea is it's like a club, like the original meaning of the word club, you know, something that you do as a group all together every week for people that are too busy to, you know, cook or whatever. Otherwise they might just go home and have a ready meal, but they get to go there and have a home cooked, you know, sustainable, healthy meal with other people. So anyway, that's really great.
That sounds so good. I want to go to that.
So I'm doing guest chefing for that in a few weeks' time. I've got plans for other things, but nothing that's really, you know, fully developed yet.
Cool. So I'm sure people would have more questions for you, or maybe want to connect with you or see what you're up to and hear about those ideas that are in the pipeline. Where would they be able to find you?
Well, I'm on Instagram, Tanya, Tanya, _ Fairtlough, Fairtlough, or on Facebook. We have a group, a Cara group, so that's CA space RA space BUA. Oh, I have a Facebook group page, for my food, which is currently called the Couscous Cousins. And yeah.
You're on Instagram as Curly Kale as well, aren't you?
Yes, that's right. Also, also on Instagram's Curly Kale Conscious Food.
Okay, yeah, cool. We'll tag all your links into the bottom of the podcast as well, so you can check back on that. Yeah, cool. Well, it was an absolute pleasure talking with you, Tanya, as always.
Same. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. If you want to check out more information on that, I'm gonna post a link somewhere about that as well, just below. And thanks again.
Thank you.